morning, good afternoon, and good evening, hockey fans. It is a brisk little 3 degrees Celsius, 37 degrees Fahrenheit in a clear and sunny Bridgewater, Nova Scotia today. My name is Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, and welcome to the Wednesday, April 27th edition of the Bridgewater's Finest 2016 NHL Playoffs podcast. And I'm excited. The second round gets underway tonight. I'm ticked off that it's not after the first round is finished, as you'll remember from yesterday, but I am anticipating tomorrow where we're going to be back on a normal schedule, only dealing really with round 2 and basically doing the moratorium on round 1. So remember, this episode is going to contain complete round 2 predictions, so stick around for those because I know those are the ones that you're really here for, what you really came to hear. So one more time, just what we're going to be doing today. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tee up Game 7 between Anaheim and Nashville, the last game of the first round. We're going to talk about that one for a few minutes before we go into my complete round 2 predictions. And if you'll remember, since we don't know what that Pacific matchup is going to be in the West, I'm going to give a prediction based on Anaheim winning Game 7 and a prediction based on Nashville winning Game 7. And whoever happens to win Game 7, hold me, and I'm holding myself to that prediction. So that's what we're going to do. After we do the full predictions, then I'm going to tee up Game 1 between the Islanders and Lightning, which is actually the first game that goes on tonight. And as someone pointed out in the comment section on yesterday's episode, that means that Game 1 of the second round is going to be, if it ends in regulation, likely done and completed before the puck drops for the final game of round 1. And again, that to me is absolutely ridiculous. I don't know how you guys feel about it. Not a ton of people commented on the video last week, or not last week, yesterday. Last week, good Lord, I'm losing weeks now. Not a ton of people commented on that on the video yesterday. So I don't know how you guys feel about it. Again, to me, it's just really frustrating that you would go and not even let your first round finish before you start your second. If Tampa Bay had 8 days off, if you waited until Game 7 was done tonight, gave the teams an off day in the middle there, and then started round 2 on, I guess it would be Friday. If Tampa Bay has 8 or 9 days off, great. That's their gift. That's their reward for being the first team to win their series. That's great. If they come into Game 1 of their series with, rink rust, if you will, that's their mountain to climb. Like, I'm not concerned about that. I don't think it bothers the integrity of the game to do something like that. And I don't think it hurts Tampa Bay. As a matter of fact, it gets them a couple days closer to getting Stamkos back. So I think they'd be fairly happy about that. But in any case, it still bugs me. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but it still really bugs me. Okay, folks, let's get into it. The final game of the first round, Game 7, Nashville at Anaheim, series tied at 3. This game gets underway 10 p.m. Eastern tonight, available on Sportsnet in Canada, NBCSN, as well as certain Fox Sports regional affiliates in the United States. Frederik Andersen, Pekka Rinne. Andersen has been a tank since he entered this series. He's been almost untouchable. Pekka Rinne has not played the greatest in this series. Let's be perfectly honest. Their Preds are giving up an average of nearly 3 goals a game. I think it's 2.83 or something like that. We will talk about it when we do the preview for the next round. But Rinne needs to be better. He absolutely needs to be better in order for Nashville to really have a great shot here at winning Game 7 on road ice in Anaheim. Another player that needs to be better, let's look at Anaheim's side. Ryan Getzlaf. Game 6 was another ice-cold night for Getzlaf. I know they only scored 1 goal, but Getzlaf was not in on it. He was a -1. I think he only might have had 2 shots on goal, or maybe even only 1. Getzlaf only has 5 points. Now, he does lead the Ducks with 5 points, but this has been a very low-scoring series. So he's only got 5 points. He is a +4. So, I mean, on the defensive side of things, he's been fine. He's been on the ice generating, but it hasn't been reflective for him yet. And that's going to be, that's a bit of an issue. I mean, the Ducks need their best players to be their best players. Speaking of which, Corey Perry does not have a goal in this series. And if Corey Perry scoring in Game 7 could very easily decide the game, because I get the feeling with Perry that it's one of those situations where once the floodgates open, the floodgates are really going to open. So I think once they kind of he gets going there, I think it's going to be goals in bunches. If Perry scores in Game 7 tonight, that could be the deciding factor, because that could really heat him up and get him going. On Nashville's side of the ice, Shea Weber. Here's a guy, he's obviously an elite defenseman. He's got the most dangerous in terms of doing physical harm to a defender slap shot in the league. Shea Weber needs to stay out of penalty trouble. He's averaging nearly a minor penalty a game. He's got 10 penalty minutes in 6 games. So Shea Weber is too good of a player and eats up too many important minutes to be sitting in the penalty box. So that's an aspect of his game that he really needs to keep in check for Game 7. And if Nashville happens to win, moving on, because they would face San Jose in the next round. And San Jose's power play, I believe, in these playoffs, if I remember correctly, has been, pretty ridiculously good. Their power play throughout the season, I think they were the number 3 power play team in the NHL or something like that. So Shea Weber getting into penalty trouble, it's not going to bode very well against a team like San Jose. So that's an aspect of his game he needs to get under control. And I'm pointing the finger straight at Mike Ribeiro in this game. Mike Ribeiro, to me, needs to prove why he's still a top 6 forward in this league. He is a top 6 forward. He's centering that second line with, I think, Craig Smith, and I can't remember who's on the left. But he needs to prove, not only to me, but I'm sure to his own organization, why he's still a top 6 forward. You look at his numbers in this series. He's got 1 point in 6 games. He's got 6 penalty minutes. Every single one of those penalties has been a bad penalty. I think Anaheim has scored a couple of power play goals specifically off of Mike Ribeiro penalties, if I remember correctly from going over their games. Mike Ribeiro, this is a put up or shut up game for him. He needs to prove why he's still a top 6 forward. If he doesn't, I could see them putting him on the block. He might be attractive to somebody who's in need of a second line center or like a third line center, something like that. Maybe, I don't know, but he's a guy that I think has something to prove here, needs to prove it, maybe to keep his job. I take a look at this series. I think Anaheim's offense is better. I think Anaheim's defense is better. I think Anaheim's goaltending is better. I think Anaheim's coaching is better. Every aspect of this game, I think Anaheim is better, except for one. Nashville has fully embraced the underdog mentality in this series. 100%. It started games 1 and 2 when they went into Anaheim's building and took both of those games from the Ducks, who won a division. They fully embraced this underdog mentality, and you can't discount that, especially in an elimination game. But this is an elimination game that goes both ways. Both teams, just like Chicago, St. Louis, both teams have their backs against the wall. I like Anaheim tonight. I think the Ducks are going to beat the Preds. I'm going to give it to them 4-3. I think this is going to be a high-scoring, exciting game. I think the offenses are going to be on point. I think Corey Perry gets on the board. Ducks 4-3 to win the series in 7. All right, folks, now it's time. Now it's time to get into the round 2 full predictions for the Eastern and Western Conferences, series predictions. Here they are. And in the next couple of videos, again, I'll do what I did with the first round, and I'll just remind you what the predictions were for the next couple of days, probably, obviously today, probably tomorrow and Friday. I'll just toss them out there and remind you what they are. But let's get into it. We're going to start in the Eastern Conference, and right there at the top, the Metropolitan Division matchup, 1 versus 2. This is the matchup that everybody wants to see. The Washington Capitals as the Metropolitan Division champions, taking on the second place Pittsburgh Penguins, who dominated their first round series. Season series between these two teams, Pittsburgh won 3 of the 5 games, outscoring Washington by a pace of 16-13. In terms of offense, regular season, Washington was the number 2 offensive team in the NHL, 3.02 goals per game. Their goals per game average has taken a huge hit in these playoffs. They're only the number 10 offense in these playoffs, due in large part to the way Michael Neuwirth played at the end of that series. But they're only number 10. They're only averaging 2.33 goals per game in these playoffs. Pittsburgh side, they were the number 3 offense in hockey in the regular season, 2.94 goals per game. Their offense in these playoffs has exploded. So these are two teams offensively going in exact opposite directions. Pittsburgh is the number 1 rated offense in these playoffs, 4.2 goals per game against Henrik Lundqvist. That is massive. 4.2 goals per game. They're the top offense in the playoffs. Defensively, Washington was also the number 2 defense in the NHL this season, only 2.33 goals allowed per game. They have stepped their defensive game up really to make up for the fact that the offense hasn't been performing the way they want it to. Washington is the top-rated defense in these playoffs, only giving up 1 goal per game, 6 goals allowed in 6 games. Pittsburgh was the number 6 defense in the NHL this year, 2.43 goals allowed per game. They've stepped their defensive game up as well, due in no small part to the play of Jeff Zatkoff early in the series and Matt Murray late in the series. They're the number 3 rated defense in these playoffs, only giving up 2 goals per game. Now, obviously, as much as this series is a matchup of Alexander Ovechkin versus Sidney Crosby, the two players that are indelibly tied to each other, really for all time for the history of hockey, it's a lot more than that. This series is actually a matchup of two really fantastic special teams units, and special teams could dictate who wins this series. Washington had the number 5 ranked power play in the NHL this year and the number 3 ranked penalty kill. In the playoffs, they've kept that going. They're a top 3 power play. They're a top 2 penalty kill. The special teams unit really got it done against the Flyers in the first round. Pittsburgh only had the 16th rated power play in the league in the regular season, but they were a top 5 penalty killing unit. In terms of special teams, in their first round series against the Rangers, they are not only the top rated offense, they're the top rated power play in the playoffs, and a top 5 penalty kill as well, coming in at number 4. Kuznetsov was the top scorer for the Capitals in the regular season, 77 points. Nicholas Backstrom is leading the way for them in these playoffs, 2 goals, 5 helpers for 7 points in 6 games. Crosby led the way for the Penguins in the regular season, 85 points, 35 plus goals, a great season for Crosby. He is continuing that in these playoffs. 3 goals, 5 assists for 8 points. He leads the way for the Penguins. In terms of goaltending here, I got to give the edge to the Capitals. It's not just because they played an excellent defensive series against Philadelphia. I think even if Fleury was 100% and in this series, I think I'd still have to give the goaltending edge to Washington. Braden Holtby is just another animal. Like, he's just something entirely different. And I'm starting to tend to agree with Carey Price, who for the longest time I felt was the greatest goaltender on the planet. Braden Holtby might be the greatest goaltender on the planet right now. This edge is even stronger if Marc-Andre Fleury does not play in this series. No disrespect whatsoever to Matt Murray. He played great in that Rangers series. He's facing a more difficult offense this time around, and he's facing a better goaltender playing better right now. I love Washington's goaltending in this series. It's a much stronger edge if Marc-Andre Fleury doesn't play, but it's an edge any way you slice it. I gotta tell you, I'm concerned about Washington's offense in these playoffs. I know I just talked about it, but I look at that team and there's something that just seems off about it. Now, look, their top guys are doing their thing. I'm not seeing a ton of depth scoring from this team, and I think against a team like Pittsburgh that played the way that they did in the first round, where they rolled really all 4 lines and got production really from all 4 lines, that Washington needs to respond in kind. It can't just be the big guys, because the big guys are going to see a healthy dose of Pittsburgh's best defensive players who are playing very well, and they're going up against a good goaltender in Matt Murray or Marc-Andre Fleury if he does happen to come back. I like the Penguins in this series. When I filled out my NHL.com bracket, I think I took the Capitals in this, because this was the matchup that I predicted. I think I took the Capitals in this one in 6 or 7 games, but based on the first round, I have to change it slightly. I know Pittsburgh is not going to have home ice advantage, but I like the Penguins in this series. I think Pittsburgh beats Washington. I think it's another 7-game classic. I think Pittsburgh goes into Washington in Game 7 and wins Game 7. Maybe Fleury's back by then. I'm expecting a ton of magic from Crosby and Ovechkin, an instant classic of a series. Take the Penguins in 7 games. The other Eastern Conference matchup in the second round sees the number 2 team in the Atlantic Division, the Tampa Bay Lightning, taking on the top wildcard team from the Eastern Conference, the New York Islanders, who upset the Florida Panthers in the first round. Tampa Bay, as we mentioned earlier, had a very easy time, in terms of games anyway, with the Detroit Red Wings. That series never particularly felt in doubt. Season series between these two teams, the Islanders won 2 of the 3 head-to-head matchups, outscoring Tampa Bay, though, just by a margin of 12-11. In terms of the offenses here, Tampa Bay had a top half of the league offense in the regular season, 2.73 goals per game. They have noticed a drop in production, obviously, with the absence of Steven Stamkos. They're only the number 9 offense in these playoffs, 2.4 goals scored per game. The Islanders, for their cause, had the number 11, I believe, best offense in the NHL this regular season, 2.77 goals scored per game, so 1 higher than the Lightning. And in these playoffs, that trend has continued. The Islanders are the number 8 offense in these playoffs, 1 higher than the Lightning, and they're scoring 2.5 goals per game, so about a tenth of an extra goal per game. Now, obviously, they had that shootout series with the Panthers, and they, had 6 games where the Lightning only had 5, but Islanders producing at a slightly higher rate than the Lightning. Defensively, Tampa Bay was a top 5 defensive unit this regular season, 2.41 goals allowed per game. They really stepped up the defensive game in the first round against the Red Wings. They're the number 2 rated defensive team in these playoffs, only 1.6 goals allowed per game. Ben Bishop, what a series he had. The Islanders were the number 13 rated defense in the regular season, 2.57 goals allowed per game. They're just outside the top 5 in these playoffs at number 6, only allowing 2.33 goals per game against. That's really not a bad clip at all, 2.33. You're going to have a hard time getting more than 3 or even getting to 3 on Thomas Greiss. He had an excellent first round. As we talked about before, both of these teams did not have great power plays throughout the regular season. Tampa Bay's was abysmal. They were the number 28, I believe the worst power play unit that made the playoffs. Number 28 in the league last season, or in the regular season rather. They were a top 10 penalty kill at number 7. The Islanders only had the 17th best power play. They were a top 5 penalty kill at number 4. 2 very good penalty killing units in the regular season. In terms of the playoffs, Tampa Bay's power play struggles have continued. They're only the number 10 ranked power play in these playoffs out of 16 teams, but they are the best penalty killing unit at 96%. The Red Wings could not get anything going on Tampa Bay when they got power play opportunities. The Islanders, number 6 power play, number 5 penalty kill. Their special teams unit did get it done, and they did a good job against the Panthers in the first round. For both of these teams, their leading scorers in the regular season are the guys that are leading the way in these playoffs. We're talking about Nikita Kucherov for Tampa Bay, had a 66-point season, a 30-goal season for them. Kucherov leading the way for them in these playoffs, 5 goals and 3 helpers for 8 points. And on the Islanders side, obviously, John Tavares, 70-point season, had 33 goals and nearly got to 35. He took over the tail end of that series with the Panthers. He's leading the way for the Islanders, 5 goals, 4 helpers for 9 points. One thing I'm loving about these playoffs right now and the way that they're shaping up is that we're going to have intriguing goaltending matchups no matter who wins at this point. There's intriguing ones in the West, intriguing ones in the East. In terms of this particular series, you got to give the goaltending edge to the Lightning. Ben Bishop is one of the elite goaltenders in this league. He showed that in the first round, played tremendously well against a Detroit team that did throw quite a few pucks at him in that series. He was equal to the task. I got to give the goaltending edge to the Lightning. No disrespect to Thomas Greiss. Dude stepped in when people expected him to fall on his face, and instead he stood on his feet like a man, and he played a big boy series in that first round. But my goaltending edge for this series definitely goes to Tampa Bay. I think the goaltending could very easily really determine this series, because these are two offenses that were, middle of the pack in the regular season. They've been relatively middle of the pack in these playoffs. So I really think that the goaltending is going to determine this series. And based on the fact that I have to give the edge to Bishop, I have to give the series edge to the Lightning. Home ice advantage is definitely going to help them out. I actually like the Lightning to win this series in 6 games. Now, yes, that does mean that they would have to beat the Islanders in New York in Game 6 at the Barclays Center, which was bumping in the first round. It looked like an amazing atmosphere. But I like the Lightning here. I think they're just the better team. Yeah, the Islanders beat them 2 out of 3 games in the regular season, but I like Tampa. I think they're playing better hockey. I'm going to give them the edge in this series. Lightning in 6 to set up an Eastern Conference final of Pittsburgh versus Tampa Bay. Okay, let's move to the West and talk about the Western Conference matchup that we know. The Central Division champion Dallas Stars taking on the number 2 team in the Central, the St. Louis Blues, after their thrilling Game 7 victory, finally exercising the demon that is the Chicago Blackhawks. Season series, St. Louis beat Dallas 4 of the 5 games that they played against each other this year. They were 4-1 straight up, but they only outscored Dallas 11-10. So what that means is that one victory for Dallas, that was a big one. I think it was like 6-2 or something like that. It was not a close game. So Dallas blew them out once, but St. Louis, got to give them credit, man. They won 4 of those 5 games. Dallas, as we've highlighted before, was the number 1 offensive team in the NHL this year, 3.23 goals scored per game. They've stepped up that production just slightly in these playoffs to 3.5. They are the number 2 offense in these playoffs, but they really looked like a hot and cold kind of offense in that first round. They had moments against Minnesota where they looked brilliant, and then they had moments against Minnesota where they looked terrible on the offensive side. So, yeah, they are producing, which is great. It looked a little spastic to me, but they're still producing. You can't argue with numbers. St. Louis was the exact middle of the pack in terms of their offense in the regular season, 2.67 goals scored per game. They've basically kept that almost perfectly throughout these playoffs, that 7-game series with Chicago. They're the number 7 rated offense in these playoffs at 2.71. So their production has increased, but only very slightly. Defensively, Dallas was the number 19 unit in the league this year, bottom half of the league, 2.78 goals allowed per game. That trend has held true in these playoffs. They're only the number 11 ranked defense out of 16 teams in these playoffs, 2.83 goals allowed per game. St. Louis, to their credit, a top 5 defense in the regular season, only allowed 2.43 goals against per game. That hasn't really held true in these playoffs. In fact, they gave up more goals against per game than Dallas did in that series against Chicago. The number 13 ranked defense in these playoffs, 2.86 goals allowed per game, which to me is shocking given how well I thought Brian Elliott was playing and how well he did play in the early part of that series. But, again, St. Louis did have a little bit of trouble with Chicago, which, obviously they always do. Chicago's a great team. So defensively, these are 2 teams that are, looking for that spark. Neither of these 2 teams have been having great success on special teams. St. Louis right now is a top 5 power play unit, so the power play was working against Chicago in the first round. They're rated at number 4. Dallas with the number 4 rated power play in the regular season, only number 9 out of 16 in these playoffs. Dallas was also a top 10 penalty killing unit in the regular season, and they're only at number 12 out of 16 in these playoffs. So special teams, Dallas is definitely looking to pick up their special teams game. St. Louis, a top 3 rated penalty killing team in the regular season, is the 2nd worst penalty killing unit in these playoffs so far. Chicago feasted on the poor Blues penalty kill, and like the Blues got themselves into a lot of penalty trouble in that series. That's something they're going to have to clean up here against a team like Dallas that could score goals in bunches. Jamie Benn led the way in scoring for the Dallas Stars this year, 89 points, 40 goals, nearly got to 50 assists. He had an unbelievable regular season, and he's leading the way in the playoffs. He's the top scorer in these playoffs, 4 goals, 6 helpers for 10 points. He's the only guy, I believe, currently in double digits. Vladimir Tarasenko led the way for the Blues in the regular season, a 40-goal campaign for Tarasenko, 74 points. But it is Jaden Schwartz that is leading the way for the Blues right now in the playoffs. 3 goals, 4 helpers for 7 points. He's got 1 more point than does Tarasenko. Schwartz, a big effort in that first round. He's leading the way for the Blues. Goaltending edge in this series, I have to give to the Blues simply based on the fact that at least they know who they're going with. Dallas, that was the story for Dallas in the first round, was these weird roster decisions. First of all, playing Tyler Seguin when it wasn't necessary, and now he's hurt. How much are we going to see him in this series? Is it a re-aggravation of the Achilles? Dallas still doesn't seem to be talking, but that seems to be the prevalent theory. At least St. Louis knows who their guy is right now. And right now the guy is Brian Elliott, without question. So I have to give the edge to the Blues because at least we know who's going to be in net for them night in and night out. It's going to be Brian Elliott unless he totally tanks early in this series. It's going to be Brian Elliott. Goaltending edge goes to the Blues, and based on that, I like the St. Louis Blues to upset the Dallas Stars in the second round. I think it goes to 7 games. I like the Blues in Dallas. Again, I'm taking the Road Warriors here, I guess, in terms of elimination games. I like the Blues in Dallas to beat the Stars on their home ice. Brian Elliott, or if it's Jake Allen, whoever it is, the goaltending for St. Louis comes up big. Dallas's goaltending fails them down the stretch, whether it's Niemi or it's Lehtinen. The defensive side of their game fails them down the stretch. This series could be a shootout, but I like St. Louis. I like the Blues. In Game 7, they move on to the Western Conference Final. It's a brave new world. Okay, guys, here comes the clusterfuck. Now we're going to talk about the series that we don't know what series it's going to be yet, so we're just going to talk about them both. If Anaheim wins Game 7 tonight, that would set up, they would host San Jose in that second round series. It would be the Pacific Division champion Anaheim Ducks hosting the number 3 team in the Pacific, the San Jose Sharks. Season series there was 3-1 for Anaheim. They only outscored San Jose 5-4 in those games. Anaheim, only the number 17 offense in hockey this season, 2.62 goals scored per game. They're top 5 in these playoffs at 2.83. They're getting the job done. San Jose, number 4 ranked offense in hockey this season at 2.89 goals scored per game. They're really getting it done in these playoffs. They've increased that. They're the number 3 rated team in these playoffs at 3.2 goals scored per game against Jonathan Quick. That's pretty damn impressive. In terms of defense, Anaheim, top-rated defensive unit in the regular season, 2.29 goals scored or goals against per game. They're still top 5 in these playoffs. They've gotten a little better. Only 2 goals against. Frederik Andersen has really turned the team around. San Jose, they were a top 10 defensive unit in the regular season, 2.52 goals against per game. They're number 5 in the playoffs so far, 2.2 goals allowed per game. A very good first round from Martin Jones and the San Jose Sharks defensively. We talked about how good of a special teams unit Anaheim had all season. Top-ranked power play, top-ranked penalty kill. They're only the 11th ranked power play in these playoffs. So the power play definitely leaving something to be desired there for Anaheim, and that could be a key to the game tonight against Nashville. But they are still a top 3 penalty killing unit in these playoffs so far. San Jose had the number 3 power play in the regular season. They got the number 7 power play in these playoffs. They're doing okay. It's not great. They're doing all right, though. They were only the number 21 ranked penalty killing unit. That's kind of holding true. They've gotten a little bit better in the playoffs. They're in the top 10 at the very least, just outside the top half of the league in terms of penalty kill in the playoffs, sitting at number 9. Getzlaf was Anaheim's top scorer this year, had 63 points on the season. He's still the top scorer for the Ducks in the playoffs. He's only got 5 points in 6 games, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, 2 goals and 3 helpers. Joe Thornton, obviously Jumbo Joe, another 60 assist, 80-point season for Joe Thornton. It's like he can just put those in his back pocket. He had a great regular season. It's Brent Burns, the defenseman turned winger turned back defenseman. He's leading the way in terms of points for the Sharks in these playoffs. He's got 2 goals, 6 helpers for 8 points in just 5 games. So Burns getting it done for the Sharks. Goaltending in this series, out of respect to what Martin Jones accomplished in the first round, I'm going to give this a push. And it's only because we haven't seen Frederik Andersen play the full round. In all fairness, as John Gibson played those first couple of games. So in all fairness, look, Andersen's been phenomenal. Like, he's just been really, really tremendous. And really, I think in terms of talent between these two goaltenders, Anaheim's got the edge. But in deference to the fact that, you know, Jones played the full series, played well the whole series, was really never looked like, oh geez, I don't think this kid's going to make it. I'm going to push the goaltending, but it's very slightly towards Anaheim's side. I would like the Ducks in this series, potentially. If this is the series that it goes, Game 7 in Anaheim, I think it would go the distance to Game 7. These two teams know each other very well, playing in the same division, obviously. So I like the Ducks in 7 games. They'd win that Game 7 on home ice. Ducks in 7 if the Ducks win tonight. Now, if the Predators upset the Ducks tonight, that would set up San Jose hosting that series against Nashville. Season series between Nashville and San Jose. Nashville was undefeated in regulation. They were 2-0-1 against San Jose this season and doubled them up in terms of scoring, outscored them 10-5 in those 3 games. Nashville only had the number 13 rated offense in the regular season. They've only got the number 13 rated offense in the playoffs as well. Unfortunately, in the playoffs, there's only 16 teams. They're only scoring 2 goals per game in these playoffs so far. That's why it would be such a huge upset if they beat the Ducks tonight, because offensively, they're really not getting it done. They're only scoring 2 a game. Defensively, they were middle-of-the-pack team in the regular season, 2.6 goals allowed per game. That clip has gotten worse in these playoffs. Nashville's only the 12th ranked team in the playoffs. Out of 16 teams, 2.83 goals allowed per game. Nashville, top 10 power play in the regular season. It's only clipping by at number 14 out of 16 in these playoffs. Special teams is being a problem for the Predators. The penalty kill, middle of the road, was number 16 in the regular season. They're doing actually not too bad in the playoffs. They're number 6. So the penalty kill has at least gotten a little bit better. Top scorer for Nashville was Philip Forsberg in the regular season. 30-goal season, had 64 points, but it's Shea Weber who is leading the way for a Predators team that is still searching for offense. He's only got 4 points, but he leads the way in terms of scoring for Nashville. It's an impressive feat to me that Nashville was undefeated in regulation against San Jose, because San Jose obviously had a good season, but so that's a feat. That's a feather in the cap. That's something to hold on to. The goaltending between these two teams, I am going to give it a push again. And that's just me being a bit of a wank, because San Jose has good goaltending. Martin Jones is playing well. If he falters, they've got James Reimer. James Reimer is a starter caliber goaltender in this league. It's unfortunate that he's second on the depth chart. He should be a starter somewhere, but he's there. He's there if Martin Jones crumbles, and he's got playoff experience. Pekka Rinne is an excellent goaltender. He is all world. He is a great, great goaltender. In terms of the way they're playing right now, Martin Jones is outplaying him. Pekka Rinne's got more experience, but Martin Jones is outplaying him. So one more time, I'm going to push this. It's a slight edge towards San Jose just based on the way that they've played in these playoffs. But again, where Rinne's got all the experience, I've got to push it. Quite frankly, I think if this is the series, I think San Jose is going to run them over. I'll be perfectly honest. If Nashville upsets Anaheim tonight, San Jose has a path to the Western Conference Final, and I think they would get it done. In that potential series, I would like the San Jose Sharks in 5 games to take out the Nashville Predators, just based on the way they're playing right now and the goaltending right now and the momentum right now. I think the Sharks, who are well rested, they only went 5 games with the Kings, they're well rested. I think they would steamroll, actually, Nashville. If Nashville wins tonight, I like the Sharks to beat them in 5 games. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to tee up the first game of the second round, and that's how we're going to close the episode today. The New York Islanders traveling to Tampa Bay to take on the Lightning, Game 1 of that series, Eastern Conference semifinal. Game gets underway at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. It's available on CBC in Canada and NBCSN in the United States. Your likely goaltending matchup, Thomas Greiss taking on Ben Bishop. The first question I got to ask is one that I alluded to a little bit earlier. What kind of, rink rust should we expect from Tampa Bay? This is now at least 6 days off for Tampa Bay, if not 7. They're going to get, obviously, a huge boost by the fact that Stamkos is back practicing with the team. There's no timetable for his return, but you've got to expect that seeing him on the ice so quickly after the procedure that he had has got to be a big bump for them. It's got to be a big boost in terms of confidence and momentum. But I'm expecting to see some kind of rust. You can't take 6 or 7 days off and not have at least some kind of competitive rust on you. So, but what do you guys think? Do you expect to see that tonight? Do you think they're going to be a little slow, maybe getting out of the gate? Do you expect maybe the Islanders will score first? What do you guys think is going to happen early in that game until the Lightning kind of get their legs back under them? This is another uphill climb for the Islanders. It was an uphill climb in the first round to beat a team that I think objectively is probably better than them, but just not as seasoned and not as playoff ready, I guess, as the Islanders. I mean, even if you don't have success in the playoffs, being in the playoffs means something. So they had more experience, and I should have known that when I made the prediction. But in any case, it's another big uphill climb. Tampa Bay, in almost every way, I feel is objectively better than Florida. Even though they didn't beat them in the division, I think in terms of a complete team, I like Tampa Bay much better than I like Florida. They need to step up to the challenge, they being the Islanders. They stepped up to the challenge in the first round. They met Florida head on, and they beat Florida at Florida's game. That's something that they're going to have to try to do here again to a Tampa Bay Lightning team, which again is objectively better. They've got a better goaltender who is going to play better in this series. Mark my words. So it's an uphill climb. They need to step up to the challenge. I'll be interested to see how they respond to that challenge in Game 1 tonight. Obviously, that top line for Tampa Bay is going to draw all the attention from the Islanders defensively. I mean, Kucherov and Johnson alone putting up 15 points in 5 games, 3 points per game between those guys in the first round against Detroit. I have to imagine that they're probably going to draw the Islanders' best defensive pairing, which would, I think, have to be Johnny Boychuk and Travis Hickey in terms of their defensive game, not just the 2 best defensemen, because I think that's Hamonic and Leddy. But defensively, I think Boychuk and Hickey are probably the pair that are best equipped to handle Kucherov and Johnson. So I have to expect that they'll be seeing a lot of Boychuk and Hickey. I feel like Kucherov and Johnson are still going to chew them up and spit them out. But that'll be interesting to see. Maybe it won't be Boychuk and Hickey. I could be totally wrong about this, but my impression is that defensively speaking, they're the 2 best. I figure they will get a lot of time against Kucherov and Johnson. And this time of year, we always love to talk about X factors. It used to be a primary component to when I did these predictions, but I'm taking a look at a potential X factor in this series. I don't know, I could be totally off base, but I'm interested to hear what you guys think. Is it an X factor that the Islanders have John Tavares, who is their franchise player, while the Lightning do not have Stamkos, who is their franchise player, in the lineup. I'm just talking about like a psychological X factor here. There's a certain degree of comfort that comes with your franchise player being right out front in the lineup every night producing. And there's a psychological detriment to your franchise player being out, not being in the lineup, practicing with the team, but not on the ice, not producing in games. So I do have to wonder if the fact that Stamkos is out is going to kind of play mind games with the Lightning here in this round, because you look at the other side of the ice, and let's face it, Detroit's star players are, older. They're still stars, but they were much better players 5 years ago than they are now. Tavares is elite now, and Tavares can change games on his own. So I feel like there's a psychological edge there, and hopefully the Islanders are aware of it, and hopefully the Islanders use it, because I think that can be a huge benefit to them in this series. Tonight, I like Tampa Bay to get off to a great start tonight, actually. I don't think there's going to be a ton of rust on them. Let's hear what you guys have to say about that one more time, but I like the Lightning to get out to a good start tonight. I'm going to take the Lightning to win Game 1 on home ice. I'm going to give it to them by a score of 4-2. I think Bishop has a good game. The Islanders probably get quite a few shots on goal, but I like Bishop to stand tall. I'll take the Lightning 4-2 to beat the Islanders. Okay, folks, that's going to do it for the Wednesday, April 27th edition of the Bridgewater's Finest 2016 NHL Playoffs podcast. Just to give you an idea of what tomorrow is going to look like. Obviously, tomorrow we're going to review the 2 games that we have on tonight, and we'll do our rundown, kind of closing the book on the Western Conference first round playoff matchups, which will end obviously with Game 7 tonight. So we'll do that tomorrow. We'll review the 2 games. I'll remind you what my round 2 playoff predictions are, and I'll remind you right here one more time. So that's going to be the schedule for tomorrow. But in the Eastern Conference, in round 2, I like the Penguins to beat the Capitals in 7 games, and I like the Lightning to beat the Islanders in 6 games. In the Western Conference round 2, I like the Blues to upset the Stars in 7 games. And if Anaheim wins Game 7 tonight, I like the Ducks to beat San Jose in 7 games. That'll be an instant classic of a series. If Nashville upsets the Ducks tonight, I like the Sharks to beat Nashville in 5 games. That's it for me. Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. That is the episode. It is now in the books. We will see you again tomorrow when the second round is fully underway.